Alright, hello, welcome back to my Kerbal Space Program full tutorial, and in this episode we're going to be getting into orbit. So, we left off yesterday with 75 science, and we had just gone on a suborbital flight straight up into space and then straight back down. So, for our next orbital flight we're just going to hop straight into the vehicle assembly building, and we're going to create our vessel. So, we're going to first want a command pod. But this time, since we've unlocked some more science, we're going to take this Science Junior and put it underneath. The Science Junior gives you a lot of science, and we're going to want a lot of science so we can research more stuff. Then we're going to need heat shield, since orbit involves very fast speeds. So a heat shield down below will help us protect our craft from re-entry, and then we're also going to need a parachute. All right, so that's our craft. And then we're going to need a decoupler, and then a second stage. And this will be since our second stage is going to be used exclusively in vacuum, so we're going to use a vacuum optimized engine, so in this case the Terrier engine. And then, so you can see over here it says 534 meters per second. Well, that's really a lie, because this is accounting for if this engine were fired at sea level, I would get 534 meters per second. But if it were to fire at vacuum, it would get much more. So to change it, you just go to this little delta V symbol here, and then choose vacuum. And now it'll tell me it gets me 2166 meters per second, which is much more like what I want. But for the time being, I'm going to keep it at sea level so I can see what the first stage is going to give me. So then, I'm going to get another decoupler, and some more fuel tanks. And if I put let's say I put a swivel engine here, because we're going to need some turning speed, that's only going to give me 1600 meters per second, which is okay. I mean, it's nothing to shy about, but I kind of prefer a little more. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on some like boosters to the first stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the radial decoupler, which they sort of decouple on the side, and I'm going to get 2 of them. Put them right about there, and then grab some more fuel tanks. Two will suffice, and then I'll use the Reliant engine. And then, since we don't want this pointing straight into the wind, we're going to need some aerodynamic surfaces, so just the aerodynamic nose cone. And then, last time we had our ship fail because we forgot fins, so let's make sure to not forget fins this time. There are fins. And then, as you can see, the little booster is only connected at the radial decoupler here. We don't really want that. We want it to be secured a little more. So if we go into structural, and then the EAS4 strut connector, we can just hop on some struts like that. So now it's secure. Okay, so next we're going to have to check our staging. So we want all 3 of these engines to light at the same time. And then once these side tanks are depleted of their fuel, we will decouple them. And then in theory the large tank should have more fuel left. So it'll keep going, and then eventually we'll decouple it, and then we'll have our second stage, and by that time we'll be in space. So that is going to be our basic craft design, but we're also going to need some science materials. So let's get a 2-hot thermometer. We're only going to need 1. We'll grab us a, well, let's see, last episode we did science in, okay, so we're not going to need so we're going to do a barometer and a Science Junior for this flight. That works. Okay, so that will be, well, I'm just going to move this up a little more. Okay, so that is going to be our rocket, but it's not, oh, and so notice how I have 2 Reliant engines, which don't turn at all, but provide more thrust on the side, and then 1 swivel engine, which can sort of like turn to help steer, which is what we're going to want because of our flight trajectory that we're going to use to get into orbit. Oh, I forgot to name this craft, so this is going to be to orbit. So I press save, and our staging is good. We're going to have Jebediah piloted again. Ooh, by the way, we can change Jebediah's outfit because we're in 1.10. So if I want him to be blue or orange, let's go with orange for today. Okay, so if I press launch, it's going to give me an error. It's going to say the launch pad cannot support vessels heavier than 18 tons of a 2-orbit mass total than 24.28 tons. Okay, so that means that I have to upgrade the launch pad so I can support bigger craft. So if I right-click on the launch pad and press upgrade, it's going to cost $25,000, and it's going to mean that I can right now I can only launch craft of 18 tons or less, but if I upgrade it, I can launch craft of 140 tons or less. So I'm going to do that, and you can see the building kind of changed. Now we still have a little bit of money, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade mission control. Now, if you upgrade mission control, two things happen. You get more contracts, and if you upgrade it in tandem with the tracking station, then you will be able to see the map view will be enhanced. And we'll see. I'll show you about that a little later. But I'm just going to upgrade the mission control and the tracking station while we have the money. Although we're on easy mode, so money's not really a concern. And then I'm going to upgrade the astronaut complex too, so that Kerbals can perform EVAs, and Kerbals on EVAs can place flags. So that will give us more science available when we're in space. So I'm going to do that. And okay, so now we can go back into the vehicle assembly building in order to launch our rocket. Okay. Oh, I forgot one thing. We can add, if you go into structural, we can add the launch stability enhancer, which will basically hold our rocket while it's on the launch pad so it doesn't tip over, which is something that we're going to want. So I'm just going to put it right about there, and that should be pretty good. Okay, so let's save and launch. Okay, so the basic principle of how you get into orbit is you do not want to go straight up, because we went straight up last time, and as you can see, we just go straight back down soon after. We want to stay in orbit, right? So the way you stay in orbit is you basically have a lot of sideways force. So if I go into the map view, I can show you what I'm talking about. So what we did last time was we just went up, 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 and then back down, right? Well, that's not really going to stay in orbit. What we want to do is we want to get into a circle. So how we did that is we go up a little bit, but then we also start going to the side. And if we go to the side fast enough, then we'll be going this way, and then Kerbin will pull us this way, and it'll cancel out, and then we'll just curve around Kerbin like magic. I mean, orbital mechanics is basically magic. So in order to do that, when we launch, we're going to launch up and then start turning to the side. And then by the time we get into space, we're going to be basically flying parallel to Kerbin. So you'll see what I'm talking about when we get into our flight. So, as you can see, when we upgrade the launch pad, the little texture, whatever you want to call it, for the launch pad actually changed. So, okay, so we're going to check our staging. And in fact, we don't want to decouple the boosters as we let go of the launch pad. So I'm just going to add an extra stage for the launch tower thingy. Okay, so our staging looks good. We're going to activate T for SAS, and then Z for full throttle, and then control a little bit because this is probably way too much thrust. And then, okay, so once I press space, the engines are going to light. But then I'm going to want to press space again so that the tower thing will let go. And, okay, so I'm going to do that. So space, space again, and now I'm going off. Now I'm going off pretty quickly, so I'm going to hold control. Or not hold, but like press it. Okay, so now I'm going up into the sky. So I'm going to wait until I get to about 100 meters per second, and then I'm going to start my gravity turn. Now, if you ever watched the SpaceX launch, they always call out the gravity turn initialment. So to start my gravity turn, I'm going to press D. And pressing D is going to turn my craft to the right, which is what I want. And as you can see, as I press D, the little engine in the center swivels, because that's how it works. So if I press D, I'm turning, and over time that's going to move my prograde marker to the right, which is what I want. And remember, the prograde marker represents what direction I'm moving. And eventually I want to be moving to the side, like 90 degrees this way. So if I keep doing this, so right now I'm at about 10,000 meters. So now if you press D too hard and get far enough outside this prograde circle, the atmosphere is just going to like mess with your craft and you're going to fall like we did last time. So you want to stay relatively close to the prograde circle until you get high enough into the atmosphere. So at about 20,000 meters, that's pretty good. So now you can start turning a little more sharply. Now, obviously, you can make this much more efficient if you turned at like the perfect angle when you start. But it's okay. So now we've run out of fuel on our main booster engines, so I'm going to detach them with the spacebar, and then press Z to get to full thrust, and then I'm going to turn to the right a little. So now if we look at our map view, you can see we have our apoapsis, which is at 123,000 meters. Now that's perfectly high. We only need it to be at about 70,000 meters. So I'm going to stop thrusting. Okay, so now we're heading up this way. Now, in theory, if this were a SpaceX launch, this engine would keep firing until, like, basically until it separated and went to go land on the drone ship. But okay, so you can see our orbit is like this. So if we didn't do anything, our orbit, we would just crash back into Kerbin again, which we don't want because we want to stay in orbit. So what we're going to do is we need to burn this way. We need to be moving this way more. And if we burn this way, it's going to take this little arc and it's going to widen it. So the little 2 points at the bottom are going to get farther and farther apart. And, well, in reality, this is an oval in disguise. It's just half of the oval is hidden by Kerbin. So if we widen the oval enough, then eventually it'll come out the other side of the oval will come out the other side of Kerbin, which is going to be called your periapsis. And then by that time it'll be a circle around Kerbin, and we will have been in orbit. Okay, so if I zoom back in, I want to so I'm right here, and I'm at 112,000 meters, and so I'm just going to wait a little bit more, maybe some time warping, to a little bit before your apoapsis, so that'll be pretty good. And then I'm going to go out of map view, and I'm going to press Z to fire my engines, and I'm going to turn all the way to 90 degrees, the border between the blue hemisphere and the orange hemisphere. And now you can see I'm burning parallel, I'm like thrusting parallel to Kerbin, which is what I want to get into orbit. And, well, I just ran out of fuel, so I'm going to separate my stage and then light the vacuum engine. Okay, here we go. So now, if I look at the map view, you can see the little tips here are widening, which means we're getting closer into orbit. So now, if we stop burning now, we would still crash back into Kerbin, which is not what we want. We want to get into orbit. So getting into orbit is less of going up and more of going to the side. So anyway, this is going to take a while, so I can do some, so if I press the period key for time warp, it says cannot warp faster than 1% while ship is under acceleration. I don't want that, so if I hold the Alt key, then it goes into physics warp, which is kind of dangerous to physics, but it's fine for this purpose. Okay, so I'm just going to pause burning with X, and so as you can see, we're not yet in orbit, but we're close. But if we burn, our apoapsis is going to get pretty far away from us. We don't really want that, because that's a waste of fuel. But, so we want to burn where our apoapsis doesn't really get any farther away from us. So I'm going to go a little closer to the apoapsis. Remember, the apoapsis represents the highest point in your orbit. So now I'm closer to the apoapsis, maybe a little closer. Okay, that's probably pretty good. And then I'm going to recenter on the edge, which happens to be my prograde vector. And I'm going to hold Z to raise my orbit. So you can see my apoapsis really isn't moving, but the rest of my orbit is. Oh, and okay, so now you can see we have a periapsis. So our periapsis is 65,000 meters. Now we want it to be in space, because if it was in the atmosphere, it would slow us down, and eventually we would return back into Kerbin. So if I hold Z some more to raise it, and, well, 112 is about good, so I'm going to press X to stop thrusting. So now you can see I'm in orbit. If I time warped around Kerbin, we're staying in orbit. So good for us. We achieved it. Now, if you noticed, Jebediah actually leveled up. He is now a 1-star pilot, which means that he has, in addition to stability assist, he can hold prograde and retrograde. So if I press the prograde marker here, Jebediah will automatically lock us onto prograde. Similarly for retrograde, which is just opposite of prograde. Butt end in the direction you're moving. Okay, so if I don't really care about what I want him to do. Okay, so now it's appropriate time to learn some more orbital maneuvers. So if I go into the map view, moving prograde would raise the opposite side of the orbit some. So if I was, say, here in my orbit and I burned prograde, this side of the orbit would raise, and then eventually become the apoapsis. The apoapsis will move because the apoapsis isn't really a fixed point; it's just a variable. And then if I burned retrograde here, this would lower down and become the periapsis. And that's how we get out of orbit, but I'll talk about that later. So there's some other directions that you can hold. So this is called normal or anti-normal. There's another one on the opposite side. And that basically adjusts your orbit. So you can see, like, from this view, our orbit is like a plane. You can, like, adjust the plane that your orbit's in. And then if you hold radial in or radial out, which looks like this, that would basically it would widen your orbit without really moving prograde. So it's kind of complicated how it works, but if I just demonstrate here, it's sort of widening the orbit. It's kind of hard to tell. Anyway, okay, so our periapsis is still at 109,000 meters, which means we're not going to crash into Kerbin, which is what we want. Okay, so now if we go back into ship view and time warp to sunlight, ooh, much better. Okay, so now, as you can see here, is our ship, and we're going to want, or at least I'm going to want to take some science. So if I right-click on the present, so one thing you're going to want to do is learn to quick save. So if you press F5 on the keyboard, it says quick saving up here. So that means that you've quick saved. And if you've ever run into an issue where your rocket explodes, then you can always revert back to a quick save. And in this game, your rockets are going to explode frequently. Okay, so I'm going to take my barometer, my pressure data, while in space near Kerbin. The instrument reads 0. It is as if it were in a vacuum. Great, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to take a crew report, even though I get 10 science. Nice. Keep that experiment. And I'm going to log the Science Junior. So I'm going to conduct material study. 50 science. That's a lot of science. So I'm going to keep that. And then I'm going to go EVA Jebediah. So now he's in his spacesuit, actually in space. So if I press spacebar, he's going to let go. And so now he's just floating in space, but you can't really control him. You can only turn him. But if I press the R key for RCS, he has a little jetpack. So now I can control him. See, so look, he can go this way with A, this way with D, W is forward, or I think W is forward. Yeah, W is forward. Shift is up, control is down, and so you can like jetpack him away. So, and then I'm gonna press F to grab onto the capsule again. But before he boards, I'm gonna have him take an EVA report. 16 science, nice. And then I'm gonna have him board. Now, if I had the barometer here is a special type of the barometer here is a special type of instrument which you can reset without having a scientist. So if Jebediah here right-clicked on the barometer and pressed take data, then he would have like taken the information from the barometer, and so you can do it again when you got into a different biome. But in this case, we're only going to go into one biome, so I'm not really going to deal with that. Maybe I'll do that when we land. Okay, so now it's time to return to Kerbin. So as you can see, I'm approaching my apoapsis, which is where I want to be. And I want to basically, to return to Kerbin, you want to lower your periapsis until it's within the atmosphere. Atmosphere starts at about 70,000 meters, but I like to lower it to around 35,000 meters. Okay, so if I go back, if I hold retrograde, and you can always press the W and A and S and D keys to move it if you want. So I'm holding retrograde, and now if I go to map view and press Z, and then wait until my periapsis is at about, okay, 46, 38. Okay, that's pretty good. So my periapsis is in an appropriate position, and so now I'm going to want to, our heat shield is currently blocked by our big giant fuel tank. And so I'm going to press space to decouple our fuel tank, because we're not really going to need it. Actually, I'm going to quick save first, though. We're not going to need our fuel tank and engine because we're already on track to crash into the atmosphere. So I'm going to, and even though there's fuel in it, we can still let go of it. So I'm going to press space, and there it goes, off into the abyss. And then I'm still holding retrograde, and I'm just going to hold, or time warp until I crash into the atmosphere. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. Almost there. Perfect. Okay, so notice during time warp, physics doesn't really happen, so your your craft doesn't really turn, which is fine. If you want to get into physics warp, where physics is calculated, just hold Alt and press the period key. Anyway, so I'm going to do that right now. Physics warp, and I generally like to do physics warp until I get some flamey effects. And the flamey effects basically mean that if you're physics warping at 4 times speed, the flamey effects can do some weird things to your ship which you don't want. Okay, so now that we are approaching land and we have our flamey effects, I'm going to turn off the time warp. And so as you can see, we're going sideways, right? We're going parallel to Kerbin, and eventually we want to be going down under our parachute. So as you can see here, we're slowing down, and our periapsis is lowering. Because the lowest point we're going to hit Kerbin is slowing down, right? I mean, running into the atmosphere is effectively burning retrograde because of how it works. Now notice here our materials bay has these doors open. Yeah, those don't really affect physics, but if you want, you can always close the doors and for aesthetically looks, which I like to do. Okay, so now, as you can see here, our speed is 2,346 meters per second. That's a lot of meters per second, especially if you only want to land at around 5. So we're going to have to shave off some speed. Good thing our heat shield is doing a good job for us. So we're just going to wait here while we re-enter. And as you can see, Jebediah is not experiencing many Gs, only about 1 G so far. Maybe that's 2, I can't quite tell. So he's good. Now, one thing we're going to have to concern is when we release our parachute. If we release our parachute too early, then the parachute could rip because we're going too fast. But if we release it too late, then we would crash without having lost enough speed, which we don't want to do that either. So Kerbal Space Program has a good indicator of that, and you see the little parachute icon is red right now, which means it would be dangerous to launch the parachute now. So we're not going to want to press the space bar. But if we press the space bar when after it turns red, after we slow down enough, it'll turn yellow. And yellow basically means you may damage your craft, or the parachute may break if you launch it now. But if it's white and gray, then it's like all safe to launch the parachute. So we're going to wait until it's white, and that's going to happen after we lose our flamey effects. Oh, flamey effects. So beautiful. Oh. Okay, so hopefully we get some science, and in the next flight we're going to, in space around Kerbin there's 2 biomes. You have in space near Kerbin and in space high above Kerbin, and those are true for any plotty. So you have in space near the Mun or in space high above the Mun. In space, and then you also have like in space above Kerbal, which is the sun, or in space near the sun. So anyway, so as you can see, we're slowing down considerably more now because the atmosphere has gotten thicker because we've gone down. Now we're only at about 25,000 meters. And if we go back to our map view, well, we're no longer in orbit, we're in suborbital flight. And ironically, our apoapsis is higher than our current altitude, but we're never actually going to reach there because Kerbin's going to block us. Because it's a big planet with a hard surface. Okay, so now our flamey effects are sort of going away, and we can check our craft is all good. Nothing has exploded, so yeah. So even though our flamey effects are gone, we're still losing speed significantly. And for some reason my parachute just exploded. I'd never press the spacebar. Huh, maybe it's automatic or something. So I have my parachute out, and we're slowing down still, but I'm kind of bored, so I'm going to do some physics warping. Remember, press the Alt key if it's giving you difficulty. And then so I want to turn to surface level, although we're going to be landing on water, so that doesn't really matter. So now at around 1,000 meters, the parachute should deploy. Yep. And then now we're just going to gently lower ourselves down onto the water. So there we go. Might as well stop time warping. So now we're in the water. So if I bring Jebediah on an EVA, oh, and his mass is going to turn the craft over. That's fine. I'm going to have him take an EVA report. Going to have him take the information from the crew report, which will reset the crew report. I'm going to have him take the barometer, and then I'm going to have him board, and then I'm going to have him. I'm going to take again the pressure data, take again a crew report, and then that's going to be all of the science I can do. The Mystery Goo and the Science Junior are similar in which they can only be done once per flight, unless you have a scientist. But we have a pilot, because pilots offer us more stability control than scientists. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the mission, so I'm going to recover the vessel. So now once it loads, we'll be able to see how much science and how much money we've earned from this flight. Keep in mind, contracts give you science and money as you complete them. So we've earned 140 science for a total of 252 science. We have 871,000 money, which is because some of our contracts got completed, so we earned money from that. And then Jebediah advanced to level 1 during our flight. So now if I go into mission control, I can see we have a new contract here, Explore the Mun. Simply head by the Mun and pass it, easy as pie, no risk at all. Now, so if I fly by the Mun, I get 128,000, and then if I accept this contract, I will immediately get 44,000 money, and upon doing everything in the contract, ironically there's only one thing, I would get 83,000. So once I fly by the Mun, I would get 128 plus 83,000, 200,000 money, so around 210, 220,000, and then I would get 44,000 before that. So this is a worthwhile contract, and I'm pretty sure if we accept it, after we do it, a new contract to land on the Mun will be presented. So in the next episode, we're going to fly by the Mun and learn about intercepts with the Mun, and then in the episode after that, we're going to land on the Mun. And then, okay, so we're not really going to want any more contracts. And if we go into science, we can see what technology we want to research. So I'm going to research flight control and aviation so we can unlock more stuff, even though we're probably not going to do that much. So in this row, we have heavy rocketry, propulsion systems, which gives us like smaller engines, fuel systems, which give us more fuel tanks, advanced construction, some more fairings, aerodynamics, some more aircraft parts, landing. Oh, we're probably going to want landing because eventually we're going to land on Kerbin. So I'm not going to research anything yet. But advanced flight control, space exploration gives us a bigger crew capsule and some rover wheels. Miniaturization gives us some smaller parts. Electrics gives us some solar panels and batteries. So yeah, so that next episode we're going to go explore the Mun. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in that episode. Have a nice day.